until you get up there that you realise how incredible it is, and it's an amazing feeling every time you get up there. You're defying gravity and getting to see things from a whole new perspective. Both my parents are Australian. My mum is Indigenous Australian. My Indigenous heritage is from Tharawal region, which is Shoalhaven Wollongong. My nan grew up and was born down there with 11 other siblings. My mum was, I suppose, a domestic housewife at the time growing up, so she looked after us as we grew up. And my dad had a mix of jobs. My whole family, my grandparents and my mum's brother and sister all lived in New South Wales. And when we were really young, my parents made the decision to move to Queensland. Why, I have no idea to this day. But we moved to a small country town called Imbil on pineapple farms. So grew up running a muck when we were younger, stealing people's pineapples, and had a lot of really fantastic experiences riding horses and herding cattle and fixing fences. Parents were divorced pretty early on, not long after we moved up to Queensland. We went through a lot as kids, so in and out of custody battles between my parents. We were in and out of family court system for about 8 years growing up, and us kids were separated for a lot of our childhood. So me and my sister stayed with my mum and my brother stayed with my dad. Our mum would go away quite often, and then we would be responsible to look after the house. And we didn't have a close relationship with our mum. It was very much a case of she would come home and we'd be yelled at, and so we kind of learnt eventually that it was just easier to stay upstairs and away from her than it was to engage. I reached breaking point in our family life. I called my grandparents and I said, I'm leaving home. I don't care where I'm going. I had another auntie who had a friend down near where I lived. So she said, do you want to leave tonight? And I was like, she's like, Renee, you need to make a decision. Do you want to leave home tonight? Me and my sister left my brother behind, and it was a really hard decision because he had a really hard upbringing with him jumping around between my mum and my dad. I jumped in this black car with a stranger. She drove me to the airport and landed at Sydney. My grandparents were there, picked me up, and then that was kind of it. I never went home again. To this day, we still aren't close with her, and our dad isn't around anymore, so that was never rebuilt.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, go.
My grandmother grew up in a time when it wasn't kosher to be Aboriginal, so she hid it as hard as she could. She was deeply ashamed of it, and that was the time that they grew up, and that was the status quo during that time. Quite surprisingly, my mum growing up, she tried really hard to reinvigorate that culture and our history. Where our culture kind of went missing, where our history left our family. So my nan's dad grew up in Tharawal country, and he decided to never pass on language. Eventually, over many generations, it was reinvigorated and re-established within parts of our family. I think my nan was quite impacted by it for many, many years, and she's a lot more confident now about embracing who she is, but it took 60 years for her to get to that point.
We love you, Grandma.
For me personally, it was a very different experience embracing my Aboriginality. Because of my relationship with my mum, I didn't like being associated to her, and that meant being involved in Aboriginal days. And as a kid, I used to be really embarrassed to be involved in those activities when we go out to markets or go out to, community events. But I also used to get bullied quite a lot in school because I was very fair-skinned. So it was very hard for me to identify with being Aboriginal because the majority of people around me couldn't identify it, so they didn't accept it. And so I didn't accept it. I have a memory of when I was about 15 with my pop, and there was an airliner flying over the top of us, and he pointed it out and said, did you ever want to become a pilot, Renee? Why don't you consider that as a career? And I remember thinking at the time, I said, yes, I'd love to do that. And then really thinking, I don't think I can actually ever achieve that. I was fortunate enough that my auntie was looking out for me, and she saw in the local newspaper an advertisement for the local Air Force cadets taking in a new cohort of cadets. She brought it home. I was like, yeah, I'd love to give it a shot. And at that point, I didn't have any friends in my new town, or I didn't know anyone in the community. So when I was 15, I started Air Force Cadets. Every school holidays for that 2 years that I was in the program, that involved pulling aircraft apart, putting them back together. And we used to have the opportunity to meet engineers, meet navigators, meet jet fighter pilots as well. And it really influenced the decisions that I made moving forward from there. When I was coming towards the end of my schooling, I obviously had to start thinking about what I wanted to do with my future. Through the Air Force Cadets, doing the program in Aeroskills Mechanical, after learning about how aircraft are built and how to pull them apart, put them back together, I knew that I wanted to do something in that realm, but I always felt as though I wanted to be a leader of a crew of people like that. I didn't necessarily want to be the person performing maintenance. And I found aerospace engineering at the University of New South Wales. And I remember when I found it, I read the description and I was like, that's what I want to do. That sounds awesome. I called a family member over at the time and I was like, what do you think about this? Do you think I should enroll in this program? And they turned around and they were like, do you think you're smart enough to do that program? And I was like, I'm going to do that program now. Uni was actually really, really difficult for me, predominantly in the first 3 years. I had moved in with a whole bunch of students that had really great family lives and really close-knit families, and every holidays they would go off with their families, and I pretty much stayed on campus. I really had to build a network around me because I didn't have family there, and I felt quite lonely when I first started out. So I was so ambitious to prove my family wrong that I was smart enough to do this degree. But equally, I was so stressed and I genuinely had thoughts where I didn't think that I could actually pull it off. Just the combination of having to work really hard, trying to figure out who I was and organise my life was particularly overwhelming. So yeah, I did it. I overcame those struggles. CareerTrackers had a massive part of that as well. So they came and presented and pitched the idea of CareerTrackers, and I would say within the week I had an interview with them. One of the questions they'd asked me in this intro conversation was, you're in aerospace engineering. We don't have any students in aerospace engineering, so where do you want to work? And I was like, sorry? What are my options? And they were like, well, you're in aerospace. Do you want to work for Boeing? Do you want to work for Defence? Do you want to work for Qantas? I was like, okay, Qantas sounds good. Let's go with Qantas. So over the span of that next year, they set up the partnership with Qantas. To first of all have the opportunity to get an internship so early on in my degree was life-changing, to say the least, because it gave me skills and experience and exposure that no one else in my cohort would have for at least another 3 or 4 years. So it gave me leverage and it gave me a step up, and I'd never been in a position where I had ever been in that position in my life. if we're at a certain height and you can't achieve that 2.5% based on environmental conditions on the day, then you have to set a higher altitude to make that decision that if you have an engine failure before that point, you have to pull out. If you have an engine failure after that point, you're committed to land. I was exposed and had experiences to things that I just couldn't even believe myself. Having no academic influences and no prospects for what the future might hold, to all of a sudden a job in a major Australian airline. And I met incredible mentors and fantastic leaders through the program. So the struggles that I had through uni and some of my assignments or exams, I had support to work on those from work. And people, for the first time in my life, I had people that I could relate to that had been through the university experience and could share some light or give me some tips on how to study. And it just meant that I was fully supported, not only in my university college, but also in my work. I had life mentors and coaches among professional mentors and coaches, and it put me on the path to success and changed my life. It was more so the feeling than it was the theory behind what the career looked like. Anytime I'd step onto the tarmac, I was just in awe of the aircraft, and I wanted the opportunity to be able to sit up the front and take off and feel and see what that looked like. It was because of Air Force cadets, so that's when I got the intro, and then I was like, oh my god, I love this, like they're so big and they're so interesting and I want to know how they fly, and that honestly drove me through my entire degree and onwards through my experience at Qantas, because there's just this undying passion and interest from my perspective that I want to know how all of this operates and what are all these buttons for and why have we designed aircraft the way that we have. You're a part of a world that nobody else is a part of, apart from those up in the sky at that one point in time. So flying over the place that you live, the town that you grew up, or you're flying your grandparents up into the sky and they're getting to see things from a whole new perspective. I think that's the beauty of flying. You see sunrises and sunsets that no one will ever see from that perspective. And making sure lights are working and a few other things. Can you hear me? For me, I have a very strong passion for continuous learning, and I don't really know where it comes from, and sometimes it's to my detriment because I work a bit too hard, but I'm really, really passionate about making a difference. So I try to leverage my position to influence people that are privileged or have no association to Indigenous culture to, be open-minded about it. I try and use my position to support the Indigenous communities, and because of my privilege, I think it gives me a place in society that not many people have access to as well.
I've been waiting for this all year. Every time I can get an opportunity to host a conversation with CareerTrackers alumni is something that I look forward to.
Hi everyone, an absolute pleasure to be here today. My name is Renee Wooten. I'm a proud Thurl woman. I am very passionate about aviation and aerospace, and so I see myself working towards the tech innovation space, possibly in the space sector. If I had the opportunity, I'd love to become an astronaut. That's that's the ultimate goal. If I could do anything, that's where I want to be. There's so much purpose in what they do, and it's a world undiscovered to some degree still. So to be a part of that discovery and to be a woman in STEM, possibly in space one day, would be the ultimate goal, to be like I've come from, something so small and, you know, no academic influences, and a pretty hard family life in a very regional town, to go through to being an astronaut one day in space. You know, I feel like I've defied a few biases or overcome so many challenges that it's possible for anyone, and I want to be that inspiration for a lot of other people.
People feel like they needed to define it, putting it into a category, because if something's not categorised, then we can't contemplate it. Who are people to say how you should and shouldn't live? If that's the way you see things and do things, then that should be the way it is. My mum is a Kaurna and Narungga woman, and my dad is also a Narungga and Ngarrindjeri man. I was the youngest of 4 kids, but I also am the oldest of 2 older brothers, so on my dad's side. For me, I think back, for me, I was kind of the toy, especially for my older brothers. You know, I was used as the teddy bear or the punching bag in a nice way. You know, I look back to that and think it was out of love, but there was a lesson in that in terms of making me tougher as a person. I didn't really know what my dad did growing up. I didn't really have a great connection with him. My dad actually played AFL for the Adelaide Crows. He was part of their inception squad into the AFL, so I guess genetically that came through. It was passed on to me. My mum was an Aboriginal education worker, so she worked at the school that I went to for primary school. When I was quite young, when I was 11, I was participating in running, and people were like, "Oh, he's walking funny." We ended up going to get it checked, and it turned out to be a tumour, and it was a tumour the size of like an orange that was sitting between my hip bone. It was, I guess, a non-cancerous one, luckily, but I guess that was my first experience, and I guess hearing the words, you know, cancer for the first time. You want dum-dum?
Over. Come back inside. No. Ow! We met at the State Aboriginal Footy and Netball Carnival in 2016, where all love stories eventuate from.
For for Aboriginal people, that's where a lot of people, find love, I guess you could call it.
He walked past me on the netball court, and I'm like, "Did you just walk past me?" And then he's like, "Oh yeah, I think that was me." So
I was just like, I don't want to stop this up. Like, I don't want to seem like I'm not who I was like coming across as. Ball. Here you go. Ah! Oh, you pushed me over. You're too strong. For me, growing up, chaos was normal. We didn't have anything in abundance, that's for sure. It was very much, what was ours was everyone's. But I guess on the flip side of that as well, we were unfortunately, surrounded by, sort of drugs and alcohol and domestic violence as well. I thought that this is how my family interacts, and bearing witness to that kind of stuff as a young person, that still sits with me. Identity, it will always be front and centre, and it will always be an issue, especially for Aboriginal people. I know it's always been something that I've struggled with, and even now, I'm thinking more critically about what it is to be, I guess Aboriginal, and what does culture mean.
In this little brick veneer Lutheran church in the Adelaide working class suburb of Ferryden Park, Kingsley's friends and family gathered to mourn the 19-year-old. They should have been celebrating, because today Kingsley would have been 20.
This is 45 deaths now. How many more do they want the Aboriginal people to wait for?
My uncle was one of the first Aboriginal deaths in custody. He was found beaten and hung in his cell. Unfortunately, I never got the chance to ever meet my grandmother. She unfortunately had hung herself because of the intense fight that she fought. Through those stories that were passed down, that I don't think they will ever go away or disappear, and it will always be the fuel that sort of fires me and pushes me ahead to really make an impact, but also never forget where I've come from. University wasn't really something that I even was on my radar. I didn't think I was smart enough to go to uni. My mum actually, after working at the school, decided to pick up studying at university. So she went through and did a tertiary bridging course at the University of Adelaide, and then went on to study law. And she kind of encouraged me to do the same thing. So we were both, at uni and at home together. So we'd carpool to uni. I'd go off and do my own thing, and then would carpool home and stuff like that. I studied international studies, politics and history. I look back now and it kind of, a light bulb I think must have sort of went off into my head, and I don't know whether it was the things that I experienced growing up, what my grandmother did, what my mum did in the community as well, and that sort of put me on my path to advocating for, for our people, Aboriginal people. I remember hearing about this new thing that was kind of like in the spotlight at the time, and people was talking about, CareerTrackers, there's this really cool opportunity, while you're at uni you can go and work in an internship with a big organisation and get paid. And I was like, what? Really? Started having conversations with CareerTrackers and was lucky enough to get an opportunity to go work at Ernst & Young or EY, and being one of the first interns to work at EY. I don't think I would have ever known initially that I could get an internship while I'm studying at uni without CareerTrackers. My days were, I'd leave home at 7 o'clock and I wouldn't get home to 8 o'clock. I would be, I'd get up in the morning, I would chuck the suit on, go to work at EY, run to training in a full suit. So I'd get to training and I would be drenched in sweat. So I'd been doing this for about 2 to 3 years, and I remember literally trying to run 100 meters and I would literally have to stop. I'd be on my haunches like gasping for air, and I end up going to get tested at the doctors. And I remember seeing my normal doctor, but they had said, she can't see you, her husband will speak to you. And he said, you've got leukemia, you've got acute myeloid leukemia. I just remember sitting there as he was talking, and it felt like the world had just exploded in front of my eyes. And I remember walking out of the clinic and hopped in my car and just started bursting into tears, because I just knew that, I guess, what popped into my head was that people that get cancer die from cancer. You know, growing up, I'd been to so many funerals that family members had passed away from cancer, and I think the enormity of that just hit me, and I didn't know what to do. Like, I remember I was just bawling my eyes out, and I just started to drive, and I was thinking, like, I can't tell my family. I don't want to tell them. I built up the courage to call my mum, and I dialed the number, and for about 3 minutes, I just couldn't talk. I remember finally being able to speak and saying that to her that I've got cancer, and I just remember her voice once I'd spoken to her, hearing her heart break.
My name's Dixon. I'm currently studying at the Adelaide University. I'm in my second year. For me, sport plays a big role in my life.
You don't expect something like that to happen to anyone at 21 years old, especially a good mate like him.
It's a disease that can strike at any age.
I sort of started to feel, tired and sick and sort of these flu-like symptoms.
Kyron Dixon should be preparing for the football season ahead, but instead he's undergoing the fight of his life.
Gone through my initial round of treatment, then gone back for subsequent rounds, and at that time I was still going through a treatment, and as part of the treatment had to have these things called bone marrow biopsies, so I'd have to go in for a morning surgery where they'd have to scrape a piece of my bone to check how things were progressing. It felt like you'd been hit by a truck. Physically, your body was just so sore. The hospital was just across the road from the uni, and after each of these surgeries, I took the opportunity to go to class, because the surgery had finished before my tutorial class had started, so it wouldn't affect my my score at the end of the semester. Footy was a big thing for me, and not being able to play that. And I remember everyone kept saying, "Oh, it's so sad that you're not gonna be able to play footy." I didn't just want to be known as just, "Oh, this is Kyron, he's going through cancer." I took that on as a challenge to come back from. So getting back to that level of playing SNFL was a real achievement for me. I felt humbled, but also felt like I didn't deserve it in a sense. It started out, I was nominated for a local award with my local council as Young Citizen of the Year. I guess the ability of me to go through that experience and to come back and to show that resilience, to get back to playing football, and through being fortunate enough to get that award was then put into the state pool for an Australian of the Year award. When you think of the Australian of the Year awards, you think to the date, 26th of January, Survival Day or Australia Day. I actually deliberated it quite a bit on whether I would accept the award, and had spoken with family, close people, that opinions that I respected. By accepting the award, am I going against everything that we represent as people? If I accept the award, will I be seen as less black or less Aboriginal, or will I be seen as a sellout? Ultimately for me, it was about, I guess, what I was trying to achieve or what I had done. We need to take those opportunities to have, essentially a voice at the table, like, that platform, because a lot of the time we're having those platforms dictated by other people, and we're having our culture and our experiences spoken for by people who haven't gone through that. This is an opportunity for me personally, but also an opportunity to raise awareness as well. Through that involvement, become linked in with Canteen, the organisation that work with young people affected by cancer. My role is the National Reconciliation Coordinator. Cancer is a big issue that affects Aboriginal communities, so it's an area that they wanted to really make an impact and have an impact, and the best way to do that was to have, I guess, someone in that role to lead that engagement with community and better engaging, the young people that we support. Yeah, I want to touch base because I spoke to, when I was speaking to Kelsey, I said that I'd get her an answer back about the vendetta. I'm not sure if you heard back from Peter or Robin?
Yeah, so I heard back from Robin yesterday just saying that Peter...
Before having a little one, life was so different. Now there's so much responsibility to lead by example, and not having that growing up, not having someone who I can say that I looked up to as a leader who was there. I want to be, I guess, that person for my son, and seeing the stuff that I've seen and experienced, breaking that sort of intergenerational trauma, and I guess creating an environment that's positive and is nurturing for him.
Say cheese.
As I've gone through my life, while it's still quite relatively young, I think back to all those times where I've had challenges that I've always, I guess, gone or tried to go against the grain, and being told that you can't do this because of your height, you can't do this because of how you've grown up, or you can't do this because of your culture or whatever. It's always been a fire within me to not let those things to define me.
I just love the fact that I can just put my line out and just chill. It doesn't matter if I catch a fish, I'm just there connecting with nature. I grew up in an orphanage. Nobody knew who I was at the time. There were lots of kids like me. These people were coming through and they were going to take you and you're going to be part of a family. Foster parents were coming through and bypassing me, so I knew at that age that you had to be pretty special to actually be placed with a foster parent. It's hard to comprehend back in that day. My parents were like Bonnie and Clyde, and they stole a lot of money and they hid across the border. It was the South Australian border. My mother got caught in Adelaide and my father absconded the scene. I understand in a sense why they went to steal money. A lot of our people were subjugated to menial tasks like being domestics for the women, and the men usually, out on the stations, regardless of the capacity that they had to do way better. I do a lot of potlucks with my friends here. So everyone brings in a dish. It's a great way of getting together, I think. My father was very violent. He bashed my mother up so severely that it caused her to give birth to me. She actually died as a consequence of her injuries. As I was taking my first breath, she was taking her last breath. Even as a newborn baby, you know, you're coming into life, you already know what trauma is. Just by sheer luck, foster parents decided to get a foster sister for their foster child. It wasn't for that long that I was there in that family, but they decided to pick my foster sister over me, and I sort of guessed that I felt like I was too black to be picked, so I accepted that without any asking or anything. I just thought, okay, so I'm going to go back. I got fostered out not long after by a fantastic family. They took me in, and I knew what it was like to actually have a family. I knew what family love was. I don't remember like how long I was with my foster family. I was in primary school, and the family home was visited by 3 strangers. One of them said he was my father. I couldn't understand because I already had a dad. I didn't say anything or question anything. I just stood up there more or less in shock, like, where have these people come from? I don't quite understand who they are. I was told I was to go back for holidays to Western Australia and visit my real family. I remember being asked by the welfare lady, who do you want to live with? I was having such a great time over in WA with all the family, so I obviously picked Western Australia. My best memories are my auntie's roast. She'll cook the roast on slow, especially the roast potatoes. They were crispy on the outside and like sort of mushy on the inside. Really yummy. I was never treated like a child. If I was naughty, I wasn't allowed to eat with the family. I got told that I was a slave, and I felt like the only reason they brought me over was to be a domestic help. My dad told me that I was a wayward child and a troublemaker, so that reverberated around the family, and the whole consensus behind that all was him trying to hide his sexual abuse of me, his physical abuse, his mental, psychological abuse. It was graduating up to me actually getting dropped off at the Aboriginal Medical Service, and it got to the point where I just like, enough is enough. I was 14, going on to 15 at the time. My auntie, who's my namesake, came along, had the strength to just walk in, say to him, I'm taking Anne-Marie away, and she did. She saved my life. I stayed with her for a good couple of years, finishing off my year 12 at the time. Things were going really well. My father actually caught me as I was standing at a bus stop ready to hop on the bus, and this time the abuse was 10 times more worse. It was a very savage beating as well. Once again, left at Aboriginal Medical Service, and I think at that time Aboriginal Medical Service probably got tired of seeing me getting, going to hospital and getting plastered up. The house parent there recognised, was asking me where did I get all these injuries from. That's hard. I finally had the courage to tell someone. And he asked me, where can you go? And I remember saying to him, I have my mother's family up north. I said, I'd like to go there, I think. I knew that the small northwest town was pretty small, so I knew I could find them really easy. Yeah. Got on the bus and I went up to Port Hedland. That's where I met up with my mum's family. First time I sat down and told them everything. And for the first time I felt protected. So I knew from then that I was safe and I was with family and I felt happy and loved. A remote beach, fishing, swimming and cooking my fish on the beach in the cold. That's my pipe dream. That's what I want to do. Animals have been my only source of happiness growing up. They just give you so much love. That's what you get from pets, from animals in general. Yeah. So I have a huge affinity with animals. Yeah. I love dingoes. I really want to have my own one day. My grandfather was an old digger and his father was the explorer Alexander Forrest. On my grandfather's side, he's from Wongatha country, which is in the goldfields. I had to get to know my father's family, and then on turn I then had to get to know my mother's family, and it's sort of hard trying to navigate between in terms of getting to really know them, you know, and actually feel a part of that family. Yeah. I eventually went back to school and I was constantly getting bypassed by people who had a tertiary education, had certificates and everything. I knew I had the capacity to do it. I just didn't have the guidance, and I knew that guidance had to come from within. I knew I had to motivate myself. I went to do an enabling course. I picked a university that I thought would suit me the best, which was Murdoch University. And through going to Murdoch also, that's where I came across CareerTrackers. It was enabling students going through and doing their degrees to be placed in a corporate environment. Going to the interview with IAG was the pivotal moment when I knew that I wanted nothing less in my life. Went into the meeting room and I was going through the steps of questions. I wasn't getting any response. I was just nodding and writing stuff down. I had no idea how I went. I thought I totally failed. After about half an hour of the interview, they all got up. They invited me to go for a walk around the building, you know, to visit the floors. I thought that was really weird. But I thought, okay, I'm going to humour them. As we got down to the ground floor, going through the turnstiles there, they turned around and said to me, "See you on Monday." And I didn't quite comprehend what the heck is he talking about. So I called CareerTrackers up and I said, "Look, I'm not too sure." But they said, "See you on Monday." "Oh yeah," they said they were just going to give you an interview, but you got your internship there. I'm like, I just couldn't believe it. So I jumped on the city clipper and went down, and I was just bursting. For one of the first times that I felt included. I was there. And you would like to do a claim today? What I can do is I'll get your email address and I can send them to you. Alternatively, I can send the claim forms out to you via post. The most rewarding campaign was working alongside NRMA marketing team, doing the call-throughs to different local Aboriginal land councils and letting them know, ahead of time that NRMA are planning to do a billboard. It's going to have the traditional name of the country where it's on, the language from which country is from on there as a traditional acknowledgement, welcome to Durag country. Those billboards and the incentive behind it actually won a national award. So that was really cool on NRMA's part to actually give back in that sense. I was actually following through with what a lot of the elders had told me before I left, was like the incentive of giving back.
Wow. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests. My name is Anne-Marie Forrest. I'm a Noongar yoga woman. And before I tell you my story, I wish to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to the elders, past, present and future. If someone had told me a year ago that I would be speaking tonight and telling my story to 1,700 people, I wouldn't have believed them.
My sense of belonging belongs to me. It belongs to my country. It belongs to my people. Over 60,000 years, and I've always felt like I've never belonged, but when I look back, I knew that I did belong.
Life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. Standing before you all here tonight is one of those moments. Thank you.
The possibilities are immense, where I want to go, what I want to do. I'm just enjoying each and every day. It's a wonderful journey.
I get a sense of pride. I feel like the sense of responsibility to contribute to maintaining this land and ensuring that it's still in this pristine condition when I hand it down to the next generation. Growing up on a community like Wreck Bay, you grow up with a strong sense of not only values that get passed on to you, but a strong sense of identity and belonging. You don't realise that until you become an adult and you become a registered member and a traditional owner of country. This hut in particular is to pay tribute to those kind of individuals that help set up not only Wreck Bay Aboriginal Community Council, but the arrangement, that joint management arrangement with the Director of National Parks. In 1986, after the land rights movements, our community was given back Aboriginal land. My grandfather was one of the key forces in the community at the time. We've been in the joint management arrangement for 25 years now, trying to build the capacity of our community members, so community development, to allow us to eventually take over the functions of running this national park. We were taught as a young age that this will always be our house. At one point in time it's going to be handed over to us and our elders can rest because they've done their time. I'm one of 4 boys and I have an older sister. My dad was a hard-working man, so he's been like a mechanic his whole professional life, and my mum was a nurse but then became a stay-at-home mum. So my house was always kind of busy, running around. We always had family members visit. It was always like an open door policy, so we always had aunties and uncles that lived on Wreck Bay visiting, put the kettle on, you could hear them coming up the hill. So you have to rush and put the kettle on before they even entered the house. So it was always kind of busy, but it was love, and I think that's the way my mum raised us, is there was love in this house, and I think that's the foundation our mother set for us. After raising us, his children, he took on the responsibility of raising my nieces and my nephews without hesitation. My sister was unable to raise her children, but my father and my mother stepped in and provided that love and support to my nieces and nephew. My father has, in his lifetime, has kind of absorbed a lot of knowledge, including our family history and all that kind of stuff, so he could pass on that knowledge to us so we know who we are and which country we're endemic to. And he's traced our family bloodline all the way back to pre-Cook.
Kids that were non-Indigenous never knew nothing about the bush.
And you were helping them?
Yeah. So what was the school like education back in those days?
Oh, it was good.
So
I'd say that's good.
you went to year 10, right?
9.
Oh. 10.
10.
I thought you said year 9.
10.
I think Mum went to year 9 or you, yeah. My first memory of enjoying dancing was Wreck Bay discos. So back when I was growing up on Community, to keep the kids engaged through holiday programs, they often ran discos. And the best dance always got a prize from the DJ, whether it be a block of chocolate or a CD. Yes, a CD. But then I think I was inspired to take dance on as a kind of profession after the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games. They taught us some choreography, one of the Yungu dances, and I picked it up really quickly, including my cousin. So when we were auditioning, I recall them just pausing everyone and then going, "You two boys." So my brother and I, please get up and just demonstrate how we want it. And from there, we kind of were the lead boys for that particular group through all the rehearsals. And then that night, obviously, you get to see Bengara in action. And that's when I was inspired to kind of take it on. I created the dance troupe at Vincennia High School. I think I found at the same time something that I was genuinely passionate about. Bengara and Naisda were there at the Olympic Games, so I kind of got some insight into the Naisda Dance College, and that's when I was like, yep, I made my decision, and I made that early in year 12 that I was doing that. Upon reflection, that I may have been doing it just because I didn't want to follow the pathway that was expected for me. So when I was a kid, apparently I got tested 3 times to see if there was something wrong with me. I was just attention seeker, my mum said. I used to hold my breath till I passed out, but please don't put that in there.
Because everyone used to say, "Oh, he's the golden child." No, we just actually couldn't chastise him like the rest. It is.
I just recall just enjoying the 3 years I did at Naisda. Dance all day and then party at night, the kind of thing. I don't know how we did it, because we didn't obviously have the finances to kind of continue to live that way, but I think I had the luxury of a supporting mother and father. They used to make jokes of me, my siblings and my nieces. She had to cut the umbilical cord because it stretched too far from Wreck Bay to Sydney. And then I did my secondment with Bengara Dance Theatre, and I think once you get You hold a goal high for so long, you kind of go, yep, I'm almost there. And then when you get into that space, so for me it was Bangara, I kind of realised, can I be a dancer my whole life? Struggling artist, no money. A group of staff and students from the University of New South Wales suggested I join their crew and do a tour of East Africa, so Uganda, Tanzania and Kenya. So it was the students who were on the tour with us who suggested I come to UNSW and do dance teaching. And I'm like, oh no, I actually want something different. So when I returned from Africa, I had a look around, you know, the education, kind of go, well, where do I start? They suggested I have a look at Redfern TAFE. The Diploma in Aboriginal Studies kind of stuck out to me because I remember doing Aboriginal Studies in high school. At least I'll have something other than a diploma in dance on my resume. I graduated from TAFE, Europe. One of the teachers there suggested I have a look at the University of New South Wales Indigenous Entry Program. I had a look at the courses, and there was at that time 4 particular courses: medicine, law, commerce and social work. And it was at that moment I paused and reflected on what I've always been telling myself since I left Wreck Bay, was whatever I choose to do, I was always bringing back home. So I was tossing turn, okay, law, commerce, and I ended up choosing commerce because I don't think I had the willingness to kind of try and understand legal jargon. So I got in and excited and applied for a scholarship, and I received it. So I was like, yes. That only led to partying, you know what I mean? I think the habits of when I was a dance student kind of just carried over into my uni student days. And I think that carried on for the first 1.5 years of my studies, to the point where I failed one subject 3 times. I was suspended for 12 months. My dad just shook his head. I was like, what are you doing? My mum was a bit more assertive, the extra cursive word, you know, what are you doing with your life? And I think that necessary kick in the backside made me reflect on that 12 months and get your stuff together. And I recall going back and committing to my studies, and my studies improved. And that's when I met Michael Combs, CareerTrackers. I told him the background story of my grandfather, my community, our achievements in regards to land rights. And then he suggested I join the program because there's 5 key Indigenous entrepreneurs that I need to know. One, Michael McLeod is a part of CareerTrackers. I think he's actually still on the board, but he had his own business called Message Stick. George, if you really want to make changes in your community, imagine if you ran your own business and you were making the money and you developed the programs for your community instead of being reliant on government funding. Also, you should meet Natalie Walker. She's the founding CEO of the Australian Indigenous Minority Supply Council. When I researched and understood what actual AMC did, I was like, yeah, keen to work there. Okay, well, I've already organised you an interview next week. So it was a quick turnaround. I remember going, oh wow, okay, that was quick. So I met with the AMC team and they offered me a marketing internship. Oh no, yeah. So yeah, okay, we got the After 12 months of being with AMC, now Supply Nation, the support I received from CareerTrackers, because it was around the time I was just finishing my final couple of semesters with the University of New South Wales. My mum was sick. She was unhealthy for a long time with heart failure, renal failure, you know. And then I recall getting the phone call in the middle of the night and having to travel from Sydney. And we met her in hospital, so with my father and my eldest niece. I felt like she held on, you know, until myself and my younger brother got home because he wanted to pass on the message to me. The one message she wanted to get across before she passed away was that we had to look after the two boys. So Stephen and Chris, my two youngest nephews, who at that time were in her and my father's care. She was trying to get the words out, but I knew exactly what she was trying to say to me. She wanted to make sure that I knew that she wanted me to look after the two boys. So once I told her the two boys are going to be all right, and that it was all right to go because the boys are going to be all right, she passed away the next morning. She was very happy that I was close to finishing my degree. I was devastated that she didn't get to see me graduate. But I got my father there and my eldest niece. So after working in Indigenous Business Australia, graduating the grad program, an opportunity came up at the National Centre for Indigenous Excellence as the Business Development Manager for the Camps and Conference unit. So whilst there, kind of had my first taste of management because I was really hungry to get into middle management. But then on the corner of my eye, being a registered member of Wreck Bay Council, after completing a restructure, created a Human Resource Manager role. So in 2016, I was lucky enough to secure the Human Resources Manager role at Wreck Bay Aboriginal Community Council. Coming back home into a senior role and being younger than a couple of my fellow community members, I was a bit concerned. I always came in with the mentality, it's my mob, that's right, they're going to know me, they know what I'm about. I felt like my first couple of months was listening and learning, as you do in, you know, community. You can't learn if you're talking, but in order to kind of navigate through working in my sector, community and the Indigenous space, is understanding that we walk in two worlds. The world I have as a traditional owner, the cultural business that I do with my dad and my uncles, and the world in which I kind of do my professional work. So we kind of always put them as, you know, the Aboriginal world and the non-Aboriginal world. I'm lucky because I feel like I'm achieving my purpose. I would love that I continue to have that strong sense of identity, belonging, but help community come together with a sense of collectivism to achieve our collective goal of soul management, whatever that looks like. We define that. No one else defines that. To continue that work of my grandfather. He didn't get to be alive when we achieved the joint management arrangement, but I hope we continue his legacy and the legacy of the aunties and uncles that continue to kind of fight for what we got and what we need to achieve. That's the stuff that kind of makes me smile, and I hope continues to make me smile, and that burning desire continues because that's what I'm doing, my purpose.